everybody, welcome back to the book space where we do book reviews and tell stories. In today's video, I'm going to be doing a review of Malcolm Gladwell's Talking to Strangers. True to our tradition here, I'm going to start off by reading the first page of this book so that you can get a sense of the writing style of the author. And so the first chapter is titled Step Out of the Car, and it starts off like this. In July 2015, a young African-American woman named Sandra Bland drove from her hometown of Chicago to a little town an hour west of Houston, Texas. She was interviewing for a job at Prairie View A&M University, the school she'd graduated from a few years before. She was tall and striking, with a personality to match. She belonged to the Sigma Gamma Rho sorority in college and played in the marching band. She volunteered with the seniors group. She regularly posted short, inspirational videos on YouTube under the handle Sandy Speaks. That often began, "Good morning, my beautiful kings and queens." At this point, Malcolm Gladwell includes a transcript of one of Sandy's videos from here. So it goes, "I'm up today just praising God, thanking his name, definitely thanking him, not just because it's my birthday, but thanking him for growth, thanking him for the different things that he has done in my life over this past year. Just looking back at the 28 years I've been on this earth and all that he has shown me. Even though I have made some mistakes, I have definitely messed up. He still loves me. And I want to let my kings and queens know out there too that he loves you too." And so when I picked this book up from the library, I did not know what I was in for. When I saw the title Talking to Strangers, I had seen this book on a couple of Instagram pages, a couple of Instagram posts. And so when I saw it at the library, I was like, that book. And so I didn't even bother to read what it was about, to like read the summary or anything. I just picked it up because a lot of people had been posting it. So when I saw the title Talking to Strangers, I was not expecting what Malcolm Gladwell wrote in his book, Talking to Strangers, although I must say I was pleasantly surprised. This book here, it all starts from the story of Sandra Bland, as we saw. When I first opened the book and I was reading it, in the beginning I thought like it was made up. But then the more I read it, it sounded more and more like, what? This sounds real. And so I went to YouTube, I looked up Sandra Bland, and actually it is a real person. So because I do not live in America, I didn't really know her story or anything that happened around that time. Although you hear in the news of a lot of African Americans being shot by the police, or not a lot, but then you hear of cases of African Americans being shot by the police, I did not know of Sandra Bland's case. And so Malcolm Gladwell tries to unpack. So this whole book is trying to unpack, at least the sense that I got, it is trying to unpack what went wrong on the day that Sandra Bland got stopped by a police officer and for a routine traffic stop that made the issue escalate to the point where it became a tragedy. And so I think Malcolm Gladwell is trying to walk us through the possibilities of what Sandra Bland could have been was thinking at the time and what Officer Enciniano was also thinking at the time, and trying to unpack it in a way that we could potentially identify or understand or perhaps learn lessons from this incident. And so, as we read, the book starts off with Sandra Bland, and he Malcolm Gladwell goes on to detail the conversation that happened between the officer and Sandra. He then goes on to give us, to help us to try and get some context of all the things, not all, but like some of the things that could have informed the officer's reactions and actions. And as well, it also tries to get us to understand like how people are in general. I'll give you an example. So in the first couple of chapters, he talks about the story of Hernan Cortez and Montezuma II, who was an Aztec ruler in 1519, and then Hernan Cortez was a Spanish conquistador. And so Malcolm details this, like gives a summary of the story and how things were lost in translation. And in the end, Montezuma lost his kingdom just because of a difference in translation, a difference in culture, a misunderstanding of the nuances of language and how somebody can say something else and mean something totally different. In the Aztec culture, apparently, if a person minimizes themselves and humbles and speaks in a way of false humility, they're actually trying to communicate to you how powerful they are. But unbeknownst to Hernan Cortez and the people that were, because apparently they had to translate between two people, like there will be a person who speaks and then somebody translates what this person speaks to another language, and then another person translates what the translator has said, and then so there was layered translation, and some of the nuances of the language and the culture got lost in translation, which ended up in something really tragic happening, that the Montezuma lost his kingdom. And so I think the reason why Malcolm told us the story was to help us to understand that in each and every communication that we have with a stranger, it is not only words that are being transferred between two people. Each person comes into the conversation with a layer of the experiences and their culture. And so, yes, I agree, or a nod might mean something totally different between two people. For instance, I find myself getting caught up in this when you're having a conversation with somebody, and in a bid to try and make them see and understand that you're listening and that you're comprehending what you're saying, you nod your head. But then for them, it could be translated as you're in agreement. But no, I am not nodding my head in agreement. I am nodding my head to tell you and to show you that I am engaged in the conversation and that I understand what you're trying to tell me. So I think that particular story Malcolm Gladwell told us so that we could understand and comprehend that between these two strangers, Sandra Bland and Officer Enciniano, they were coming from two different states. One was from Houston, Texas. The other was from Chicago, and they were from two different walks of life. And so, because they were strangers, what the other is saying might have been interpreted in a different way. And that is a very simplistic way of looking at it. There were many more layers to this than just a conversation gone awry, or just two people from two different cultures misunderstanding, or an issue that has been escalated to a point and to a level that leads to tragedy. And so, as a summary of the story of Montezuma and Cortez, Malcolm Gladwell says this. The speaker was often obliged to say the opposite of what was really meant. True meaning was embedded in the use of reverential language, stripped of these nuances in translation and distortion through the use of multiple interpreters. Not only was it unlikely that a speech such as Montezuma's would be accurately understood, but it was probable that its meaning would be turned upside down. In that case, Montezuma's speech was not his surrender, it was his acceptance of Spanish surrender. And so, so Malcolm Gladwell is trying to prime us to try and look at this interaction as two strangers who have got perhaps two different ways of communicating, and who come from two different cultures and two different walks of life, trying to have a conversation and trying to understand each other, but each coming from a place of a layered place, if I may say. And so Malcolm Gladwell goes on to talk to us about the two puzzles. He tries to expand on two puzzles. One was, why can't we tell if the stranger in front of us is lying to our face? And he tries to expand on this by saying that, like, judges and people who are in law enforcement have got very limited time to get to know somebody, to get to know a potential perpetrator, and actually make a decision on whether this person they're going to pursue or not, or whether this person is going to go to jail or not, and what kind of sentence they're going to be given. So he's trying to establish, why can't we tell if the stranger in front of us is lying to our face? Why is it difficult to tell? And then the second puzzle he's trying to expound on is, how is it that meeting a stranger can sometimes make us worse off at making sense of that person than not meeting them? And in that part of the puzzle, he gives the story of Chamberlain, who was the prime minister British prime minister in the time of Hitler, that went to see Hitler a couple of times, and from each meeting he left thinking that Hitler would not pursue an evil agenda, an evil objective, but each time he totally misread and misunderstood what Hitler's intentions were. And so Malcolm Gladwell is sort of trying to portray that, like, perhaps it would have been better off if Chamberlain had not met Hitler, because maybe he would have been able to make a more objective decision about him, rather than having met him and having had tea with him. Then perhaps Hitler's welcomeness of him and niceness might have clouded his ability to make an objective judgment. And so those were two of the puzzles that Malcolm Gladwell was trying to unpack as the book went on. We then find out that people in general default to truth. We want to believe what the stranger is telling us, that the stranger that we see around the corner is inherently good, because otherwise we would be very suspicious, and we would always be afraid for our lives, our safety. And so our human default is to default to truth. And so he gives a couple of examples where, say, for instance, the Queen of Cuba, who was a Cuban expert in the DIA, but was actually a Cuban spy, and nobody knew about it for years. And although it was raised by somebody, it was Reg Brown, raised some suspicions, but it was it was cast aside as, oh, maybe he's just being too overcautious, because as one person says, Latel, other officers thought that she was the best Cuban analyst there was, so he rationalized away any uneasiness about her, because everybody else was saying, oh, she's pretty good, she's awesome, and stuff like that. And so I don't want to give away everything in the book. I think it's best that you read it for yourself and unpack Malcolm Gladwell's ideas for yourself. But one thing that I took away that Malcolm Gladwell was trying to tell us, or trying to present in an argument, is that Enciniano Encinia, I keep saying Enciniano. Encinia came to this conversation from a place of trying by all means to get Sandra Bland to get off the road so that he could do a traffic search, so that he could potentially find drugs, because some of the markers that he thought were suspicious he had seen from Sandra Bland. One thing that I took away from this book that was very interesting was the idea of the holy fool. Malcolm Gladwell talks about an archetype that is seen in Russian folklore that translated is the holy fool. And the holy fool is a truth teller because he is an outcast. And so in the book, there are a couple of people who have picked up things that others who default to truth did not pick up or did not think was suspicious. And he presented that it is the idea of their background or their upbringing, where they were in a sense had seen so much. Say for instance, Harry Markopolos, he was Greek, and he grew up in a his parents were Greek immigrants, and he grew up in a household where his parents had a fish and chip shop, and customers would sometimes come and run away without paying after they'd eaten food. And he'd seen this happen time and time again. And so for Harry Markopolos, or people like him, he did not default to truth, because he'd seen so many times how humanity can do bad things. And so he talks about the holy fool being a truth teller because he's an outcast, or being a truth, like for instance the story of the Emperor's New Clothes, where he was told that a person who's not fit for their job will not be able to see the clothes. And so in a bid to try and make himself look like he's fit for his job, the emperor didn't say anything when he could clearly see that there were no clothes. And everybody else was too afraid to say anything, even though it was obvious that the emperor didn't have any clothes, because they were afraid of being labeled as somebody who was not good at what they do. but it took a little boy who did not care, who didn't have any prejudice, who didn't have any any sense of wanting to belong, to say, you're naked, and then everybody else then saying, oh, actually. So that was very, very, very interesting. Overall, um, overall, what did I think about this book? I thought this book was a pretty interesting read. The cases made it more interesting and more, I guess, real. But there were other chapters that I wish I could unread, especially the detail he put in to he included in the book about the cases that related to sexual assault. I wish I could unread those parts. But otherwise, I feel like Malcolm Gladwell did a really good job. I hadn't read any work by Malcolm Gladwell before, and so this was actually a good first introduction to his work and his writing style, and how he writes things. And so I think the major lesson that I got from this book was this paragraph here. It says, the conviction that we know others better than they know us, and that we may have insights about them they lack, but not vice versa, leads us to talk when we would do well to listen, and to be less patient than we ought to be when others express conviction that they are the ones who are being misunderstood or judged unfairly. And so, yeah, I thought this book was pretty good. Talking to Strangers by Malcolm Gladwell. Let me know in the comment section below if you've read this book, what you thought about this book, and what was your major takeaway from this book, because I feel like it was very layered and there were a lot of nuances, a lot of things and ideas to unpack. So let me know in the comment section below what you think. Give this video a thumbs up if you'd like to see more content like this, and of course don't forget to subscribe and press the bell so that you'll get notified every time I release amazing content on this channel. Until next time, thank you and see ya.